op-ed and read it. Op-ed. Who really shut down our businesses and schools? Well, Stephen Moore wrote that, and Stephen Moore joins me now. All right, who is responsible?
Hi, Stuart. Good to be with you. By the way, I will answer that question in 1 second, but I got to say this. Stop calling the Fed hawkish. If we had a hawkish Fed, we wouldn't have 8 to 9% inflation right now. So okay. I just object to this, and that's been kind of the conventional wisdom. We've got to get that inflation rate down to 2 to 3%, or our economy is going to implode. Now, I think you were talking about the Democratic candidates kind of retreating from Biden. They're also retreating rhetorically from what they did in 2020 during COVID, where you had Democratic governors and Democratic mayors all over the country shutting down businesses, shutting down restaurants, shutting down churches, and of course, most catastrophically, shutting down our schools. And we saw with those test scores that came out last week how damaging that was to our kids. And so this has become a real issue, Stuart. In I think there's something like 28 gubernatorial races this year. We talk a lot about the House and Senate races, but those who's going to control governor's mansions makes a big difference in terms of what happens in terms of policy in this country. And Democrats are on the defensive on these lockdowns. And so you have people like Governor Whitmer of Michigan, who I think is in really bad shape right now, the governor of Wisconsin, the governor of Minnesota, Hochul in New York, where you are, all running away from lockdowns that they imposed. And it's almost comical. They're saying, well, lockdowns, we didn't do that. Well, they did do it.
You did. You did.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the worst public policy mistakes.
I agree with you.
In a generation. Had we not done what we did, I think we'd have a much better performing economy right now.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more, Stuart. And the fact is, I'll just append to what you said. You said in a generation. I think it was one of the worst mistakes we made in a half a century, and I hope we never do it again, because the evidence is pretty clear. Very few lives were saved from lockdowns, but the damage that it did to our businesses, to increased drug addiction, increased depression. We saw, I mean, what we did to our schools, we're going to be seeing, we're going to pay a price for that for 40 years.
It was a disaster, and that's a fact. Yep. Stephen, good op-ed. Thanks for joining us this morning. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Stuart.